Good evening and welcome to Rev Sherris, Rev Sherris Metaphysical Bible Hangout. So happy to be here this evening. This Bible Hangout is an extension of Understanding Principles for Better Living Church, where the Reverend Dr. Della Reese-Lett is the senior minister and the founder. And we would love to have you visit us. If you are ever in the Los Angeles area, come on down to Inglewood. Sunday services are at 1 o'clock every Sunday at 600 West Queen Street in Inglewood, California. And come on, get some hugs, get some good old-fashioned gospel music, and just really have a good old time with us. We would love to have you. A couple of announcements on the Audible Dash study, but anyway, if you just go there and look under courses, you'll see Thursday night Bible study, and you'll be able to download the materials for the class. The other thing that I want to make sure you know is that I started this new thing. So I am calling love in a deeper way into my life. And I figured, well, hey, you know, if I want love, then probably you want love. And so I have created something called Rev Sherris Love Chronicles. And so I do just a different session every morning. They're anywhere from like 5 to 7 minutes. Right now I'm working with the book Sherri Carter Scott, If Love is a Game, Then These Are the Rules. And so I've been posting them on Facebook. You know, I'm still sort of figuring out my strategy for like where to post them. And, you know, I'm a one-woman shop right here. But the information is solid. And I can tell you that I have learned a lot. I've learned why some relationships didn't work out the way that I thought that they should. And I think that it'll have some value for you. So if you are a fan of my Facebook page, you'll see the posts every day. I'd love if you leave a comment, let me know what you think. And then when I really get it together and somewhere in the bandwidth of everything that I've got going on, I'll figure out how to put them on my website. So I'll get them up so you'll be able to go to the website as well and see them. But definitely check those out. Now, every journey that we do is rooted in Scripture, and this journey is no different. We root this journey in Romans 12:2. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And that is exactly what we're trying to do. And so I just ask that if you just center yourself right now, just right where you are, turn your attention inward and focus on the breath. Whatever has gone before this moment, let it go. Whatever has happened, let it go. And just make yourself fully available to this moment right here, right now. Father, Mother God, we thank you so much for your grace, for your peace, for your love, for your guidance, for everything. Thank you so much for this opportunity that we have to come together from different parts of the U.S. and around the world and just love one another and encourage one another and remind each other that we are created in your image likeness. Let us move from this space more aware than ever of our divinity. Let us not for 1 minute believe that we are sinners, that we are wretches, that we are worms of the dust. Let us discard those ideas from our hearts and our minds now and forevermore. Let us accept our divine sonship, the sonship that Jesus taught. Let us move in a way that expresses our divinity like we have never expressed it before. I trust every word that comes from our mouth is anointed and affirmed. And I release this prayer and declare it to be so in the name and the nature of Jesus the Christ. And let it be so. And so it is. And amen. All right. So last week, I was in St. Simon's Island, Georgia. And I just have to share just a little bit about that because that retreat was probably one of the best retreats I think I have been on. It was restorative. It was life-affirming. It was peaceful. It was joyful. It was just absolutely amazing. And the women from the Universal Truth Center, and there were other women from Christ Universal Temple, from South Carolina, from all over that had come together, but the bulk of the people were from Universal Truth Center. And it was just amazing. And this spiritual community has been so instrumental in my own personal development, and I realized that being down there with them, that at certain points along the way, I have essentially gone to Miami. And it has been something where I've gone back and forth several times, starting with the first time that I heard Reverend Mary speak. And it was Chicago Panorama of Truth, 1998. And the Reverend Dr. Mary Tumpkin was doing the Sunday address for the final Sunday service. And I was so excited, and I got there. I was really looking forward to hearing Reverend Johnny Coleman speak. And, you know, I had no idea who Mary was. And I sat down, I had my little notepad, you know, I was ready to take some notes. And the person said the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman will be speaking before the Alpha Kappa Alpha Convention. And I nearly passed out because I'm an AKA, and I was headed to that convention after the conference ended. But it was too late, like where I was situated at the Hyatt Regency on Michigan Avenue, to jump up out of my seat and run down Michigan Avenue and figure out how to get to the McCormick Place Hyatt. Like, I didn't even know how to get there. And I was just outdone. And they said the service will be given by the Reverend Dr. Mary A. Tumpkin. And I thought, who is Mary? What's a Mary? Like, I was outdone. And those of you who have ever had the pleasure, you'll know exactly what I mean, that she opened her mouth, and my life has never been the same. Ever. There's just, even now when I feel in fact, she's who taught me that I even love the Bible. It was that teaching from her that helped me to fall in love with the Bible. I didn't know that these people were so rich and so full of life and vibrancy, and she taught me how to bring principle to the Bible, and how to understand the characters and to do this kind of metaphysical interpretation. And she had this nuanced way of reading Scripture, and I promise you, every time she would bring up something, and I'd be like, I read that same passage, and I did not see that. So when my goal in life is to study with the world's greatest teachers. And when I learned of Mary Tumpkin, and I had that transformative moment in Chicago, that was it. So wherever she was, I was going. Wherever I was there. And so the first opportunity I had was to go to the women's retreat at Marco Island, which I believe was the fall 1998. And I went, and it was just amazing. And the women who were there can attest to this. There was a hurricane coming from Marco Island, and Mary said, "No, we have a retreat. Be gone, whatever." And we're sitting there like, and the hurricane like literally comes, stops, and goes the other way. And so I'm sitting there like, who is this woman that even the wind and the rain obey? When you talk about a mystic presence, someone who really walked the mystical path, nothing like it. So several points in my spiritual journey, I've had the opportunity to study with her, to just sit at her feet, to learn from her. When we got ready to establish the Johnny Coleman Theological Seminary, of which I was part of the committee, and mind you, I'm a kid. Like, there are all of these PhDs, and they're sitting and talking about the Bible and, you know, its curriculum and what we need to do to lay it out and what the vision for the school is going to be and all of that. I'm just the little kid there taking notes, like, you know, just trying to write down everything. And while I'm taking notes, I'm trying to also, you know, keep all the stuff that's like being downloaded to me in these unguarded moments when I get to see these spiritual giants interact with one another. So it was life altering. So Reverend Mary made her transition November 15th last year. And I went to Miami to celebrate her life. And so when they got ready to do the women's retreat, I was invited to be one of the speakers, and I realized just the impact of what it meant, because I depended so much on her for what to study in terms of the Bible. I mean, this is a vast, vast subject, and learning from her, even knowing who to read and what to pay attention to, and who is worth paying attention to, and she was so much my filter. And at the moment of her transition, it was like, am I really ready to fly, Reverend Mary? Like, am I ready? Like, I still have more years that I wanted to receive all that you had, and like, now is the time, because it's on me. Like, it's on me to figure out what to study and who to turn to, and to really lean on the Holy Spirit to guide me through this process of Bible scholarship and Bible development. So going there and being with those women, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing, and I'm so grateful. And there's so many other testimonies, and if I keep going, I'll miss the class. So I'll stop right there. But I'll just say, don't miss the next one. The next one's going to be awesome. So tonight we are talking about Paul, and I see Bright already has my questions for me. Bright, I don't even know if I know how to answer all of your questions, but I'll start with one of them because it relates to what we're going to talk about. And he writes, Rev Sherris, as Paul was waiting in Athens, the philosopher Epicurus, who was a man with moral, mental, and intellectual characters, I don't know what that means, but referred to Paul as a babbler, and why. So we'll get into this, but metaphysically, Paul represents the word of truth. He represents the power of the word. And Athens is the intellectual center in man. It's where all of the thinking happens. But one of the challenges with the intellect is that when the intellect has not been spiritualized, when the intellect is not open to spirit, that when the word of truth comes, there's no openness. It's like Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, 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 wah. It's like you're saying all of these great things, but I don't even have an ear to hear you. And so for Epicurus, oh wait, you know what? Is Charlie Brown only American? People know about Charlie Brown's teacher, right? The teacher would talk and she would say, wah, 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 wah. I just thought about that. So I hope that reference is not specific to the U.S. But the point is that in the intellect, that what happens is that you have this. The intellect needs certainty, and it needs things to be definite and clearly laid out, and it wants to attribute everything to reason. But when you come with the word of truth doesn't move according to reason; it moves according to the Spirit. And so when the word of truth comes into your heart and mind, there are places in you where you are Epicurus, and where those places in you are not receptive to the word of truth. And you just made me think of something else, Bright, which is I need to back up. When we're talking metaphysics, we are talking about you are each person in the story. So you're Paul, you're Epicurus, you're Silas, you're Timothy. Each of those characters represents an aspect of your own mind. And so when you're looking at the metaphysics, you're pulling back and saying, what is this story telling me about the movement in my own mind? And with Epicurus is that part of ourselves that is resistant to the truth, that is resistant to the truth that I am divine. When the word of truth comes, there's a part of you that is open to hearing the truth about how magnificent you are. There is a part of you that is open to hearing that you are divine, that you are the Son of God in whom he is well pleased. There's a part of you that's receptive to that. But there's also a part of you that recognizes all of your human frailties, that sees all of the things that you don't have going right in your life, and you're saying, how can I be this perfect Son of God and I've got all of these things wrong with me? That's the Epicurus part of us. That's the part of us that moves on reason, that looks at outer evidence as proof of who we really are. But the word comes and beckons you to look within, that there is a part of your soul, there's a part of your heart that's never been touched, that's never been damaged, that's never been harmed. And that part of you is the real of you. That's the essence of you. That's the part of you that has no beginning, that wasn't born on whatever your birth date is and will not die on whatever your transition date is out of this earth plane. There is a part of you that is eternal. And the word of truth comes to speak to you, to teach you about that part of you that is eternal. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with the lecture. So I hope that helps your question of why he calls him a babbler, because he has no point in his heart where he can hear that. Oh, this doesn't do you any good, huh? Look how small that is. Nobody can see that, Sherry. Hold on. Okay. So today what we're going to do, there's a couple things. Paul has left Macedonia. He has finished essentially what we understand to be his second missionary journey, and he's now waiting in a southern province called Achaia, which today is a part of Greece. He goes alone to the city, and he intends to wait there until Silas and Timothy join him. He preaches to anyone who will hear him and listen about Jesus, and he basically draws to himself an invitation to speak on Mars Hill, which is the Areopagus, which is the gathering place of philosophers. So we're going to look at 4 things this evening. We're going to look at an overview of Paul's work in Achaia. We're going to look at the rejection that he receives in Athens. We're going to look at what it means to spiritualize Corinth, which is where he goes after Athens. And then we're going to look at what is our call to action. All right, so an overview of the work in Achaia. So in Achaia, Paul delivers a sermon to the Athenians where he draws parallels between Athenian religious beliefs and what he believes is true spirituality. And ultimately, the Athenians cannot hear what he has to say. And so what he does there is he goes to wait on Timothy and Silas. He preaches at the Areopagus. The Athenians reject the idea of resurrection, and then he leaves and he goes to Corinth and connects with Aquila and Priscilla. So that's just an overview of like what happens there. Though that's kind of like the basic story points for what happens with Paul. And also, if you guys have any questions, definitely ask those questions. Now, Bright has another question here. He says, Epicurus also gave the widest scope of his ideologies of pleasure, interpreting it as avoidance of pain and that enjoyment of good health would be pleasure, but for lower goals of sensual satisfaction. With all these knowledge, why did he not accept Paul? Okay. I don't know all of what you speak here, and I simply don't know enough about Epicurus, so forgive me on that. I'll have to do some research. Going to put me to work, right? But what I can say is that when you're looking metaphysically at what Epicurus represents, remember, we're each of these characters. So we're Epicurus as well as Paul, right? There's an aspect of us that is Epicurus. There's an aspect of us that is Paul. And that aspect of us that is Epicurus is unopen to truth. When you first come into this movement and you realize that God gave me dominion over my life, world, and affairs, and that I have the ability to shape my world however I want it to look, that through my thinking and my feeling I create my world. There are some things you create right off the bat. There were so many things that I was manifesting so fast when I first got into truth. It was like, baby, I got this. This is, hey. And then I hit the bedrock, right? And that part of myself that seemed absolutely impassable. And I guess it bears telling this story that, I was in Jacksonville, Florida. This is one of my own testimonies coming out of this experience last week. I was in Jacksonville, Florida, and it was October 3rd, 2009, or this weekend of the 2nd and 3rd. And I was there showing my film, Pastor Brown, at a church. And I was so excited and just thrilled to be there, but I was broke and in a really awful hotel and did not have the resources to get myself out of that hotel. And it was a pretty dire situation. It was a really bad hotel. Like, there was blood on the door, the mattress was nasty, the floor was carpeted but wet or just moist. No, it was pretty terrible. And I really had a come to Jesus moment in that room. It was like, honey, you're the prosperity teacher and you can't get yourself out of this situation. I had met my Epicurus. I had met that part of myself that was resistant to the truth. And the way it had shown up was in this situation symbolized um, all of what was happening. So not just this situation, but it represented the fullness of my resistance to the word of truth. And in that moment, in that room, it was like, I got to get real. Either this stuff works or I quit. But I can't tell you that you can have a life and that you can have as far as you can see. And I'm sitting here broke as a joke, can't get myself out of this, musty, dusty hotel. So that's when this truth really became real for me. That was my rock bottom that was like, no more. And I really became very intentional and deliberate about this spiritual walk, about my study, and really just working on my own mind, developing my ability to think in a straight line and to stop fooling myself that something outside of me was controlling my experience. So the full circle moment is that last week, I ended up having to fly through Jacksonville, same weekend, October 3rd weekend, having to fly through Jacksonville to get to St. Simon's Island, Georgia. And what a different story. What a different story that it really showed me where my consciousness has grown to. Getting off of that plane and having a driver there, like with a little sign that has my name on it, like Rev Sherris James. It was like, what? Look at God. So you will meet your Epicurus. You will meet that part of you that is resistant. Something that you have been trying to do, that you have been working towards and have not been able to crack. And there were many dark nights between October 3rd, 2009 and October 3rd, 2014. So I do not mean to paint a picture. There was a point even where I ended up going home to Houston, and I think this was May 2010, and I was in despair because it was like, I don't know what the heck to do. This is crazy. Like I'm in this situation. I can't figure out how to get myself out of it, and I just went home and stayed with my mama, and who knows what she thought, because I've always been a take charge person. I've always been ambitious, driven, focused, and I was shot. Literally, like a shell of my former self. And so there were many, many, many dark nights. I really want you to get that this was not this like even like trajectory from October 3rd, 2009 to October 3rd, 2014. It was many ups and downs and peaks and valleys and highs and lows. But each high got a little higher, and each low stopped being as low. So I can say that. Okay. Let me go to the next slide. So now, rejection in Athens. So we just talked about this a little bit, but essentially what happens is that Paul attempts to draw parallels between the Athenian belief in an unknown God and what he believes is the true God. And the Athenians scoff, particularly when he brings up the idea of resurrection. Now, Athens metaphysically represents the intellectual center in man, and resurrection represents restoring the mind and body to their original undying state. So when the word of truth introduces the idea that you can be restored in mind and body to your original undying state, the intellect in you, the Athens center in you, cannot hear that. The idea, especially if you've been dealing with something for a long time, if you have been dealing with something for most of your adult life, or for the last 20 years, you've been dealing with something, and the word of truth comes to you and says you can be free of this. You can be free of this addiction that has plagued your life. The intellect in you is not going to hear it. But the word of truth always comes preaching the resurrection idea, that you can be restored to your original undying state, that the part of you that is perfect, the part of you that is whole, the part of you that is complete has never been damaged. And if you will take your attention off of the limitation and give your attention to that undying part of you, that you can begin to return to wholeness. But the intellect is resistant. It is absolutely resistant to the belief that you can be more than you have ever been right now. It believes that things will always be the way that they always are. That's how you know you're dealing with the intellect. The intellect believes in what it sees. It believes in physical evidence, and it looks for proof in the phenomenal world or in the physical world to prove that what is happening is what will always continue to happen. We've got something happening in our world right now with this Ebola virus. And I, personally have been just kind of tuning it out and not paying attention to it at all. But I was in a nail shop today and they had it blasting on the TV. And I said, all right, God, I guess there's something I need to speak to. There is nothing that can touch your wholeness, your perfection, or your completeness. There is not one thing. And the health idea in you is perfect. And if you will speak to the health idea in you, you can tell Ebola and AIDS and whatever else to get thee behind me. You have the power and the authority to speak truth wherever you go and clear the space in your life, world, and affairs and the people that you care about. So we need enough people thinking in a straight line, not getting caught up in news reports, not running from one fear-based belief to another fear-based belief. Health is your birthright. You don't have to be sick, period. There are no incurables, there are no unattainables, and there are no impossibles. With God, all things are possible, period. So they have people running scared. I see people running around with masks on, and there's just this widespread fear. But the fear is a feeling, and it will draw to you the thing that you fear. Fear produces the very thing that you're afraid of. I'm not telling you to be crazy and irrational and irresponsible and go and put yourself in harm's way. But what I am saying to you is that the power of God in you is stronger than anything in the physical world. And that you have the ability to name your experience. And so you can fill your heart and your mind with the health idea, with the idea of bodily perfection, and you will crowd out the possibility for anything unlike that. And so if I were you, if I'm one of those people that would be in some kind of fear, I would spend some time reading about the health of God, that is the truth of your being, and just flood your consciousness, because there is only one power and there is only one presence, and that power and presence is concentrated through your attention. Okay. I got a couple things here. Constance says, that's the beauty of this truth, the growing process, speaking in reference to your experience. And Josh says, okay, this is referring to an earlier discussion with Dr. Price this evening regarding the Genesis, fall, and original sin. Up on the consumption of fruit and knowledge and eyes opening, etc., while mainstream Christians referred to that incident as the fall. What really happened was a transition between knowledge, intellect versus spiritual divinity. So here's the question. Does the Epicurean represent the same intellect knowledge as described in Genesis after the fruit consumption? No. Well, I'd have to know a little bit more about that, about exactly what you're saying with the question, but let me kind of talk it back to you. So what we call the fall of man is moving from a belief in good only to a belief in good and evil. So the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, I'm sorry, Joe, I got to think this out, so just bear with me. The intellect makes decisions based on the senses, but that doesn't necessarily mean seeing good and evil or seeing duality, right? But the fall of man is about moving from your eyes seeing good only to your eyes seeing good and evil. You know, coincidentally, spiritual maturity is moving to the place where you recognize that good is what I name it, and that I have the ability to call everything good, and because my word has power, so it must become for me. So that we can look at this situation with Ebola, we can look at this situation that's happening right now where there's this widespread panic, and we can name this situation good, that and begin to ask the question, what good can come from this experience? I don't know if I'm fully answering your question, but I think my answer is no. That this Epicurean knowledge is a knowledge based on physical facts. It's looking at what can be seen and perceived with the five senses. But the awareness that comes to Adam and Eve from Genesis 2 is an awareness of good and evil, that there is a power in opposition to God. Okay. Ask me another question, Ja, if I missed that question, so my apologies if I didn't quite get your question right. Okay. So Paul going from Athens to Corinth, and this happens in Acts chapter 18, verse 1, what it signifies is the withdrawal of the power of the divine word from the intellectual center and moving to the love center. All right? So now this has implications for us, because when you find yourself in a situation where there is resistance, oh, what did I do? Okay, that where you find in yourself that where there is resistance in you to the word of truth, you are bumping your head against the wall. What you are looking for is, where am I not getting this kind of resistance? And in Corinth is where he was not getting that kind of resistance. That there was a group of believers in Corinth that were open. Got a couple other questions? Oh, okay, Josh says actually that answers it. Okay, great. So spiritualizing Corinth. So here's the thing with Corinth. When Paul gets there, he finds this refugee situation, because the Roman Emperor Claudius had recently banned Jews from Rome, not Rose, typos. The Roman Emperor Claudius had recently banned Jews from Rome, and many had fled to Corinth. I'm going to mute somebody. Oh, Myra, I think I got to mute you.
Okay.
Actually, if you don't mind muting yourself, because it's not letting me do that.
Okay. Let me see if I can.
Okay. I found it. Never mind. I got it. So he arrives in Corinth, and Corinth metaphysically represents the love center in consciousness. The place where you have flow is where you have love, because love harmonizes. The place where you have flow is where you have love, because the quality of love harmonizes. So whatever is working in your life, and there is always something going right in your life, no matter how bad things are, there is always something going right. That is your Corinth. Now, Corinth had some issues, because it wasn't that they were just love, and it was agape love. It was a whole lot of licentious behavior. And what do I mean by licentious? I mean promiscuous and unprincipled in sexual matters. And they had, people who were basically the temple prostitutes, sort of, But so there's a lot of stuff going on in Corinth. But those Jews there, the Jews represent our spiritual thoughts that are reaching towards spiritual consciousness. And it is in Corinth that Paul connects with Aquila and Priscilla. Aquila and Priscilla represent the positive and receptive healing forces of nature that are always at work, rebuilding the body and repairing the ravages of ignorant man. And not, well, ignorant meaning ignorant of your divine nature. So let's pull back and look at this from a macro perspective. From a macro perspective, what happens is that Paul is as the word of truth. So the word of truth is in the word of truth is in Athens, which is the intellectual center. And it's not received there. This is the part of you that is resistant to hearing your perfection. Instead of beating your head against the wall, which is what most of us do, we fight, we struggle with ourselves, and the struggle is unnecessary. And instead, it is to withdraw the attention and go where there is some flow. A practical example. I think I shared with you guys before that one of the things that happened when I went to seminary was that I stopped exercising. Just stopped. And I'm somebody I love to hike. I love outdoors activities. I love to work out, the whole nine. That just went the way of the buffalo. And so I just didn't do it. And subsequently, with not working out, it was like, I could eat whatever. And so, breaking that habit had been really tough, like really, really tough. And several times I worked with a trainer, and I'm like, come on, Sherri, what's going on? Now, you know who you are. Stop eating like this. Stop handling your body like this. You are a temple. Act like it. But that was that Athens state of mind. It was that part of me that was just resistant to allowing that inner perfection to show. And so I go where I can get some love, right? So I can't go full cold turkey and just switch up the diet and all of a sudden back to where I'm exercising every day. So for the month of September, I just decided, no, it wasn't even for the month. For the next 7 days. For the next 7 days, I'm not going to drink soda. This was like at the beginning of September. For the next 7 days, I'm not going to drink soda. Now, I tell you, the cravings to have my Diet Dr. Pepper were like through the roof. But, I'm not going to give in. And then that 7 days turned into another 7 days. And then that another 7 days turned into the month. And now here we are, October 9th. And no soda. So that what you see in this movement of the word of truth being in the intellectual center and then meeting resistance and then pulling back and moving to the love center, that this is a movement in mind, that what you are looking for is where am I not getting resistance? Where am I able to get some traction in my life? There is some place where I am able to get traction. There is something going right in my life. Even if things are awful, there is something going right in my life. And that's where you want to drill down. That's where you want to do your work, because that's where you will begin to move out of your situation. When I found myself in that hotel room in Jacksonville, Florida, where I had to start with where I was getting some traction. Where I had to start was where things were working. And where things were working was with my spiritual development. Things weren't working in my career. My career was just shot. It was just a mess. The movie, all of that was just a high. I was there traveling with the film, but there was all kinds of drama surrounding that. That what was working was my spiritual development. That's what was working. That was the only thing that was working. Everything else was just in the toilet. And so that's where I started to drill down. And so I started to study. And I made a habit of studying. And I would just, you know, pick up books, anything that I could put my hands on that would develop me, that where I could study. And I would write. I would write as much as I could. I would pray. I mean, that's what was working. Everything else was not working at all. My career was not working at all. I didn't have a job at all. I mean, it was just everything. It was just a mess, just a hot, buttery mess. So when you find that place where there's all this resistance, that even as bad as it is, something is working, and that something is your lifeline. Whatever it is that is working in your experience right now, that is your lifeline out of where you are into your preferable reality. And so instead of beating your head against the wall, which is what I had been doing with my career, with trying to just make it happen, instead of continuing to beat your head against the wall, pull back and ask the question, what's working? Where is my Corinth? Where is that place in consciousness where there is love? And so this is my call to action for you for this week. It is to go with the flow. Pay attention to where things are working and work there. There is always something going right, and that's where you want to drill down. And what I mean by spiritualize your love center. So when he gets to Corinth, Corinth is not necessarily, there's love there, there's some receptivity there, but they're also engaging in some not so great acts, right? So to spiritualize your love center is to begin to bring order to your love center. So for me, my spirituality and my spiritual development was where things were working, right? So in that place, it is to begin to pull back and to begin to establish some order. So the first thing I did was I got serious with my tithe. Before I was, you know, I was, how do I say this? I played with the tithe. You know, where it was like, oh, I forget my checkbook at home, and so you know what, I'll catch up on the next check, or I'll bring it the next Sunday, or whatever. But it wasn't something that was like, this is my discipline and this is what I do. What I do is that I tithe. So I got to the place where my tithe became a non-negotiable. It's like I brush my teeth, I tithe. Those are two different things. And at the time, my money was funny, and so what I would do is I'd go to the bank and I would get cashier's checks, so that I knew for sure that this money was already parsoned out. That's not a word, is it? Pulled out. Making up words. That this money was already pulled out and available, so that when I hand that check into the church, whether they deposit it on Monday or they mess around and don't deposit it to the end of the week or whatever, that money is already gone. And this was not always having the money to pay rent. Sometimes I had to pay rent in parts because the tithe came first. So it was getting some very definite order. And then I went on a really intense prayer plan. Now, one of the things that I teach in terms of prayer is prayer journaling. I was never one of those people. I didn't at the time. I feel differently now, but at the time I didn't like the sound of my own voice. And Catherine Ponder in The Prospering Power of Love had introduced this idea of the angel writing prayer method, which is where you write letters to the Christ and other people. And so I started doing that, and those evolved into basically letters to the Christ and myself. And so I basically that's how I developed my relationship with God was through this letter writing process. But that like went into overdrive, where I just kept the journal with me all the time, carried it in my purse, and at any moment I might need to sit down and like write a letter to God. I started studying. Reverend Della was hosting Wednesday night classes. I started showing up on those Wednesday night classes because I was like, let me get as much spiritual truth as I possibly can. When I would walk in the mornings, because I used to exercise every day. Anyway, so while I would walk in the mornings, and I had a mantra that the Christ in me is moving me to my true place, and if I find it, I'll show it to you guys. I also posted affirmations around my wall, and I joked that because I wouldn't invite anybody over because there were all these like affirmations, like everything. You couldn't even see the wall because there were so many affirmations. But I was coming up out of there. Now that was for sure, as I am coming up out of this mess, period. Like that, if I wasn't clear on anything else. And so I joke because one of my favorite movies is A Beautiful Mind. And I don't. For those of you that have seen the film with Russell Crowe, you know it near the end of the movie when it's revealed that he is schizophrenic. You go in and there's like all these. The guest house or whatever, his office or whatever, it's like plastered with all of these like pages and pages. You can't even see the wall because it's all of this stuff. And I said, it's like a beautiful mind in my house because I've got affirmations everywhere. I in my bathroom, I had just a little bit, enough of a mirror so that I could see to do my hair. But the rest of it was given to affirmations because I was coming out of there. So that's what I mean by spiritualizing your Corinth. You go to the place that is working in your life and you begin to put your attention there and to invest in that area. And so, and at that point in my life, that was the only thing that was working. Everything else was falling apart. And so that's where I began to give an enormous amount of attention to really, really, and I was also experimenting. You know, there are some things that I tried spiritually that just, you know, that didn't work for me. I tried meditating, and that was just like giving my mind a play date. You know, I would sit down to meditate, and the next thing I know, I got a to-do list for the rest of the year. So that wasn't something that worked very well for me. But I tried other spiritual practices. I tried chanting. I tried, you know, but the point is that I started to invest in the area where things were working. And so that's what spiritualizing your Corinth is. It is investing in the area where things are working. So what you want to do, what happens is that, so Aquila and Priscilla, you know what, I don't know how to go back. Oh, crap. Well, Aquila and Priscilla, they represent the positive and the receptive healing forces of nature that are always at work rebuilding the body and repairing the ravages of ignorant man. So metaphysically, what it means when Paul gets to Corinth and he finds Aquila and Priscilla, it means that when the word of truth gets to that place where you have some traction, that there are going to be elements there. There are already healing forces at work in you in the area where you're getting traction, even though it might not be, everything might not be firing on all cylinders there. And for me, everything wasn't firing on all cylinders there. I was having a huge prosperity challenge. You know, I flat out could not master the abundance concept, and it was showing up all over my life. But the Aquila and Priscilla aspects of our consciousness are always there. They're always there at work, waiting for the word of truth to come in and to do its perfect work. So my message for you today is really to go with the flow. That Athens represents that place in the mind where you're resistant to growth. And what you want to do is start to become observant of the places in your life that are going right. And then the places where you have flow, that's where love is active, because love produces flow. That's what the quality of love does. Love, if you want to know where is some love in my life, it is wherever things are working out. That's where your love is. And you want to start to work in those places where you're getting real traction. And here's why you want to do that, because like attracts like. That the work that you're doing in consciousness is magnetic. So it's not like it stays in this one little area and it doesn't spread out to the rest of your life. And I think that that's what makes most people keep bumping their head up against the Athens state of consciousness, as opposed to pulling back and starting to pay attention to where things are working out, is because we don't trust the process. That there is a process to spiritual development. Or any development. There's a process to it. And if you will just work where you are. There's a young lady, some of you may know her, some of you may not know her. Her name is Ava DuVernay. And Ava DuVernay, she has a film coming out that I hope you guys will support. I had the privilege of producing her first film, which is a film called Saturday Night Life, I think is what it was called. It was a while ago. The film's on Showtime, I think. Anyway, it's still out there and you can see it. And this was a short film. But Ava was a publicist, and she was a Hollywood publicist who had a love and an interest in writing and directing. And she had developed a script and wanted to sell it and could not sell it. And so what she did was she took a portion of the story and made it into a short film, and then that's the film that I produced with her. And then she, kept going, and she was interested in getting her first feature because she was focused and she wanted to get that first feature out. And I remember talking to her, and I don't remember what the full content of the conversation was, but essentially she was saying that, things didn't work out for me to get my feature film done. So what she did was she took the money that she had and she made a documentary. And then with the documentary, she ended up creating. I think the documentary led to another feature film that starred Sally Richardson Whitfield. And I may be having her filmography a little bit off, so if you go and look at it on IMDb, it may be a little bit off. But there was a point where she was in this indie world making films that only a few people were going to see. And the few people who saw them really loved what she was doing, but films that only a few people were seeing. And I remember her saying, if this is where I am, then this is where I'm going to be happy, making films. That essentially I'm going to be in this present. This is me summarizing and giving you a context for what she did. That essentially it is to max out where you are. And because she settled in and drilled down and did the work that she was called to do in that moment, today she is directing a film that Oprah Winfrey is producing. So don't be afraid to max out where you are. Don't be afraid to over-deliver where you are. And I keep that lesson in mind. Ava is such an inspiration. I think the work that she's doing is just absolutely phenomenal. I'm really proud of her. Because she decided to drill down where she is and just concentrate on where she is. She maxed out where she was. She ended up going to Sundance with the second film, Middle of Nowhere, and she won Best Director, which is the first time that any African American had won that award, and certainly the first time that any woman had won that award. And then from there, I think she gets a documentary, like a little short documentary, something like a TV movie documentary for ESPN on Serena Williams. And then Lee Daniels falls out of directing Selma, and she gets hired to direct Selma. And then because, again, you max out where you are, Oprah Winfrey comes in and decides to produce Selma. And so now I see her picture on Facebook. I see like photos where she's like posing with Oprah, and I'm thinking, but I remember when she was making smaller films and said, if this is where I am, this is where I'm going to do my very best. So do not be afraid to max out where you are. Do not be afraid to go with what is flowing, because what is flowing is where you will begin to build your momentum. And most of us cannot build momentum because we keep bumping up against the Athens state of consciousness trying to make something happen. And we don't have to make anything happen. We can turn our attention and pay attention to what is working. I have a couple other questions. Bright says, Rev Sherri, thank you for that comment on Ebola. It's a little bit back. What you say, that's what you get. Yes, that's true. We need not to speak about fear or speak about negative things. So be it. Absolutely. Then he writes, the good and evil is somehow a choice between choosing the way of God and choosing the way of Satan. That is, obey or disobey. That was the reason of our fall. So let me touch on something, Bright, because you bring it up, and I may as well address it. For God to be absolute, that means that there's nothing in opposition to it. You cannot have an absolute God and have a power in opposition to God. You just don't have an absolute God. And so one of the things that, as you're developing spiritually, that to really take some time and think about is who and what is God to me. And we ascribe all kinds of things to God, and we have these very human concepts of God. To say that God is absolute, and for me God is absolute, means that there is nothing in opposition to God, period. If there can be anything in opposition to God, that means then that there is a second power. And it also means that God is not absolute. So take some time to think about your theology, meaning your God talk. Take some time to think about that, because what you believe about God plays out in your life, world, and affairs. And if you believe that there is this force of good and this force of evil, and you're a pawn in between the two, that shows up in your experience. If you believe that God can be angry with you, that shows up in your experience. If you believe that God can be mad at you or will withhold blessings for you, that shows up in your experience. Your understanding of God is central to your human experience. And there are many different understandings of God. None of them is God. All of them are understandings of God. And so part of developing spiritually is beginning to understand what you believe about God. It does not make it true in an ultimate sense. It makes it what you believe. And so you must take time to question what was told to you as a child. Don't just accept anything lock, stock, and barrel because someone in authority told you. What does the Spirit of God say in you? What does the Holy Spirit in your heart say to you about who and what God is? I want to encourage you guys, check out Rev Sherris Love Chronicles. And I wanted to say something. Oh, go sign up for my newsletter. I was sitting there like, wait, because one of the things I've been doing, I've been sending out, more information, and I've got all these great goodies. I have things that I only talk about in email. So head over to revsherri.com and sign up for my newsletter. And just thank you so much for this evening. I really, really appreciate it. Just very great. I'm grateful for you guys. I'm very thankful for this platform. And I feel like Ava, that because I'm interested in taking this message of divinity around the world. I think that everybody needs to know how amazing they are. I think that people deserve to understand that they're made in the image likeness, and to discard some of the things that beliefs that they that we've been given, that we've been beat over the head with. And I feel like Ava, okay, if it stays in this little small community and it's me and the 50 or 60 other people, that's good enough. Just let it be. Let this 50 or 60 people really, really, really max out, who they are and who they can be, and that's enough. And Bright, I see your other questions. I am going to have to answer them offline, but I will absolutely answer them for you. I'm not ignoring your questions. Thank you so much for tonight. I really I appreciate you guys. I'll see you next week. Like I said, you can go to revsherry.com/metaphysical-bible-study, and you can download the course materials if you want to read ahead for next week. All right. Have a great night, everybody.